When you stand on the coast, looking out at the sea, it all feels so permanent, so solid, like it's been there forever and always will be. But really, that's kind of an illusion. Our coastlines are actually some of the most dynamic and rapidly changing environments on the entire planet. And right now, they're facing what you could call a financial crisis. Okay, so what are we looking at here? At first glance, this just looks like a crazy, chaotic spider's web, right? But this is actually a map of the secret life of a coastline. It's tracking the invisible flow of something called sediment. That's all the sand, shingle, silt, and clay along just one small part of the UK's south coast. Every single line shows where that material comes from, where it's going, and crucially, just how much is on the move.
I mean, think about it for a second. When you're sitting on a beach, have you ever really stopped to wonder where all that sand or all those pebbles actually came from? Or maybe after a big storm, when it seems like half the beach has just vanished. Where did it go? Well, the answer to both those questions lies in understanding the coast's very own budget.
The thing is, our shorelines aren't these static, fixed lines on a map. No way. They are constantly shifting, living systems, and that's especially true now with all the pressures from climate change and sea level rise. So if we want to manage them, we first have to understand them. And the most important tool we have for understanding this whole process is something called a sediment budget. It works exactly like a financial budget, but the currency isn't pounds or dollars. It's sediment, all those tiny grains of rock and shell that actually build our coast. So let's talk about the coastal bank account. It sounds a bit funny, but it's a powerful metaphor that coastal managers actually use to track the health of a shoreline. And just like your own bank account, it all comes down to three basic things: your deposits, your withdrawals, and of course, your current balance. This diagram here really breaks the whole complex system down into a simple flow. You see, everything starts at a source, that's your deposit. It then gets held for a while in a store, that's your account balance, and eventually it gets lost to a sink, and that's the withdrawal. Let's take a quick look at each one. First up, the source. This is any deposit of new material coming into the system. The most common sources, well, you've got cliffs eroding and crumbling down onto the beach below, or you've got rivers carrying sand and silt all the way down to the sea. This is basically the income for the coastline. So all that new sediment, that income, then sits in what's called a store. This is the current balance in the account. The sand and shingle you can actually see and walk on at the beach. It could be the beach itself, or the dunes behind it, or even offshore sandbanks. But the key thing to remember is that this material isn't permanent, it's just being held there for a while before it moves on. And that brings us to the sink. Think of this as a permanent withdrawal, one from which the sediment can't come back. It might get swept by currents into a deep submarine canyon way out at sea, or it could be fine sand that gets blown by the wind far inland to form new dunes. The point is, once it's in a sink, it's gone from the coastal budget for good. Okay, so we've got our sources, our stores, and our sinks. With those three pieces of the puzzle, we can see how this all builds into a simple but really powerful idea. So how do we know if a beach is growing, shrinking, or just staying stable? Well, we have to balance the budget. And really, it all boils down to this super simple equation. Inputs minus outputs equals the change in volume. That's it. All the sources minus all the sinks. If your inputs are greater than your outputs, hey, the beach grows. If the outputs are greater than the inputs, well, the beach erodes. It really is that straightforward. All right, now this looks a little more complicated, but don't worry. This is the version the scientists use. It's the same core idea, but it adds a few extra bits for things that we humans do. P, for instance, stands for the placement of sand, like when we artificially build up a beach. And R is for things we remove, like dredging a shipping channel. It basically creates a perfect, precise balance sheet for that stretch of coast. Okay, so that's the theory, but what does this look like in the real world? What happens when a coastline's bank account actually goes into the red? When it's spending way more sediment than it's bringing in? Check this out. This is a real-world sediment budget for Brighton on the south coast of the UK. Every arrow you see is tracking the movement of shingle, and those numbers tell you the volume in cubic meters per year. This is a literal accounting of all the deposits and withdrawals along this one bit of shoreline. And here's the bottom line. In just one section of this beach, the budget shows a net loss of almost 3,000 cubic meters of shingle every single year. To put that into perspective, that's like 300 large dump trucks worth of material just disappearing. This part of the coast is running a serious deficit.
And that's why knowing this exact number is so incredibly important. As the Environment Agency puts it, these budgets are the tools that let us make smart decisions. Should we build a groin right here? Does the seawall need to be taller? Will this new development plan actually protect the houses behind the beach? The sediment budget holds the clues to the answers. And what's so cool about this whole sediment budget idea is just how versatile it is. On the left, you've got the budget for a pretty simple shingle beach, like Brighton. But on the right, well, that's a budget for a super complex estuary. They're totally different environments, but the fundamental principles, sources, stores, and sinks, they still apply. So for a simple beach, the budget is mostly like a one-way street, dominated by waves pushing sand along the shore. But an estuary? Whoa, that's a whole different ballgame. It's got to juggle inputs from rivers and the sea. It has to track fine muds and silts, and the whole system is governed by complicated tides, not just waves.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. We've seen how this works for one beach, for one estuary. But how does this whole concept of a sediment budget help us manage the future of our entire coastline? Well, planners don't just look at one beach at a time. They think in terms of these huge regions called sediment cells. You can see them here. These are massive, largely self-contained systems where sediment just circulates around. And the crucial point, the thing you have to remember, is that what you do in one part of a cell has knock-on effects somewhere else. Building a seawall in one town might protect it, sure, but by stopping cliff erosion, a key sediment source, it could end up starving a beach 50 miles down the coast, causing it to completely disappear. And this, right here, is why it all matters. Understanding the sediment budget helps us plan coastal defenses that actually work. It helps us manage erosion risk. It tells us the best place to put dredged material so it helps, not harms the coast. And crucially, it allows us to predict how our shorelines are going to respond to sea level rise. It forces us to see sand and shingle not just as stuff on a beach, but as a valuable natural capital that protects us all. And this all leaves us with a really tough question for the future, a question we're all going to have to face. As our coastal budgets get squeezed by climate change, we are going to face some incredibly difficult choices. The math of the sediment budget, that's clear, but the social and political decisions, not so much. Should we spend millions to protect one town with a massive seawall, even if we know for a fact it will cause a beloved beach somewhere else to vanish? There are no easy answers.